evening, breaking news. The Liberal Party will make a choice. Who will be the leader? Will it be the man who tried to be leader after the last election in Angus Taylor, who, as you know, tonight has quit the shadow front bench, leaving him free to make his pitch to his colleagues? Or will Susan Lee, who defeated Angus Taylor after the May election, be able to hold on? Now, as you know, Angus Taylor made the announcement just after 7 o'clock, Canberra time. I'll bring that to you in a moment. There is, as always, great confidence from both camps that they have a way to either survive, win, or blast it home. But let me tell you about the mechanics, because the mechanics matter, as opposed to the inevitable from both camps is that they're going to say that we've got the numbers here, we've got the numbers there. Now, as best as I understand, very tight about the mechanism as to how this leadership change would be forced on Susan Lee. Now, Susan Lee, of course, at any moment can demand a party room meeting. She can bring on the vote of her colleagues. If she chooses not to, then the only way to force the vote by the colleagues is for the majority of the party room to tell the whips that they want such an election. Now, we've seen this play out in empty chair motions in the past. We've seen this as direct challenges. We've seen this as leaders trying to hold on to their job. So the timing in and around when these things happen is often a sign about the confidence or lack thereof about somebody to go and take it or somebody trying to hold on to it, which is why the numbers, as always, matter. There are 51 members of the Liberal Party that will make this choice. In that, members of the Liberal National Party, some sit in the National Party room, some sit in the Liberal Party room. It is, of course, a make-up of the lower house members and the senators, everyone getting an equal vote. Now, of those 51, when this was run last time, Susan Lee won the leadership by a margin of 29 votes to 25. However, 3 people who publicly stated that they had voted for Susan Lee will not be taking part in any potential vote. Those 3 people are 2 who have left the Senate, in Linda Reynolds and Holly Hughes, and Giselle Kapterian, who never made it into Parliament as the member for Bradfield. So that brings us down to, if everything was exactly the same as it was, 26 for Lee, 25 for Taylor. Now, if Susan Lee decides to open the doors, well then some people, clearly, because that's why Angus Taylor thinks he has had some movement, that his numbers have changed, it may well be 26-25 in his favour or slightly higher. He could blow the doors off and break past 30. But until you start to see a number of people publicly declaring, who may well have been supporters of Susan Lee in the past, then you have to assume Taylor holds on to his 25. You have to also assume that the factions within factions that are the Liberal Party, that Susan Lee would be confident of being able to hold on to 26. Now, that is not about whether she is the leader, but that is whether there would be a spill motion or not. However, there have been new people who have come in the Senate, and those people are believed to have been more aligned to Angus Taylor. There are also a number of people who, of course, could flip their support because they believe the situation is so dire that it requires it, and as a result, may well be richly rewarded. We all wait and see. That's the nature of politics. That's the nature of these sorts of motions. So 26 to 25 is the important numbers for you to know. Has one person changed their mind? If so, the 26 becomes Taylor, the 25 becomes Lee, and there would be a new leader. But they have to vote for that process to take place. Again, reminder, Malcolm Turnbull, when he knew he'd lost the leadership but was demanding to be blown out of the job, demanded that the majority of colleagues signed a piece of paper to bring on what eventually was the vote that he could not win. As we know, Scott Morrison was able to marshal numbers that were the Turnbull numbers and add a couple extra, and that's how he became the Prime Minister. So that is the mechanics in and around all of this. Now, Angus Taylor, by resigning tonight but not declaring leadership, does leave some grey area here about that threshold question of are there 26 people that would walk in and say, I want to vote and I want to vote now. He has a free hand now to be able to try to negotiate and try to find that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, who knows, extra votes. They may well have been previously promised, but as always in politics, you can be promised one thing, it only ever matters how people end up voting. Angus Taylor, in resigning from the front bench, made this statement in Canberra a little earlier tonight.
Well, tonight I've tendered my resignation as a member of the Shadow Cabinet. Since the election in May last year, I've sought to be a constructive member of the leadership team and supported Susan Lee's leadership in a difficult time when we needed a rebuild of the party. But we can't mince with words. The Liberal Party is at the worst position it has been since 1944 when the party was formed. That is a confronting reality and we cannot ignore it. We have failed to hold a bad Labor government to account. We've seen a collapse in Australians' standard of living. We've seen a failure to protect Australians' way of life. Australians want better from the Liberal Party. Our supporters, those that have voted for us, and those who might have voted for us at the last election, as well as Australians more generally. I think Australians generally understand that a strong Australia means a strong Liberal Party. We must have a strong Liberal Party if we're going to have a strong democracy in this country, and we're going to hold this bad Labor government to account. The situation right now is devastating for Australians, and for that reason, we need to urgently restore confidence in the Liberal Party. That means we need strong leadership, clear direction, and a relentless and courageous focus on our values. As a first priority, we need to protect Australians' way of life. We need to focus on restoring their standard of living. I don't believe Susan Lee is in a position to be able to lead the party as it needs to be led from here. I've just a few moments ago tendered my resignation.
Now again, to the tactics of all of this, there are different ways to get to the leadership. Obviously, the leader can be told that they have lost the support of the party room. They may well believe 26, 25, 25, 26 is too close. Therefore, once you throw in the polls, they open the doors. As I say, however, there may well be a way of forcing it. That most likely you would expect would happen, or the process of that would start to happen post-question time tomorrow. Another way of the tactics to build the pressure and to build the sense of inevitability of the losing of the 26-25 vote is for a collection of fellow shadow ministers to also resign. Now, the expectation is that you want to do that when a lot of people are watching, but also when your colleagues are in the building and at full attention. That has not happened this evening. That may well happen between now and question time tomorrow. We offered an opportunity to the known supporters of Angus Taylor to join us on the program this evening. Obviously, they don't have to convince you, the audience. They are trying to convince, as I say, 26, 27, 28 colleagues. And to this moment, none have been able or willing or available to join us this evening. There is an open invitation to all of them. They know where the Sky News studio is, and they certainly know the contact details to return our calls to this show, and they are welcome on the show at any moment between now and when we are done. There is a Susan Lee supporter who is willing to speak to her leadership, and we will get to them in a moment's time. in fairness, I want to show you Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price speaking in the previous hour with Sharri Markson, stating the case as to why there needs to be a change and why Angus Taylor is the preferred leader for her.
I believe Angus holds the right values and the experience. I mean, he's a person who has built businesses. He's advised CEOs. He's run a successful family farm. Look, I just think he is a pair of steady hands that we need right now. We've not had that. We've not had that in the party room. Party room has felt demoralising. There's not that much time between now and another federal election, and we need to get working so we can stop talking about ourselves.
Now, I thought I was across every part of the process. Thank you to the person who's just informed me that there is another path here too, which is if just two MPs try to write to the whips, and then, of course, the whips inform the leader then can decide whether to go ahead or whether the force happens, which is what I was talking about before with Malcolm Turnbull. I just don't want to over-confuse the options here. I just want to show that there's a threshold here and then there's a threshold there to make it easy for the numbers. But I do appreciate the insight. Thank you. Now, this was a long day for the media and this has been a long 2 weeks. Remember, before Parliament came back, there was an expectation that this could be happening at the start of the 2-week period, and there was the back and forth in and around whether it would be Angus Taylor or Andrew Hastie. The Sky News Pulse poll, which came out today, well, is little comfort to Andrew Hastie, who well and truly tested his support, publicly said that it wasn't there and thus pulled out, yet of the Sky News Pulse is the greatest preference of Liberal voters. That said, there is a very significant number in the 40s who are simply sitting in the don't know or empty chair number. Now, the media, who have been saying it is expected today, it is expected today, it is expected today, have been playing that game and moving the timelines, either expecting this to happen at the start of last week, at the end of last week, at the start of this week, and now as we move towards the end of this week, which is why the media was waiting and ready and was there when the sun was up and was there as the sun was coming down this evening. The media, again, has just had one story to report for most of the day, and they reported it like this.
Canberra is buzzing right now with reports Angus Taylor could quit shadow cabinet.
Liberals are on tenterhooks tonight, waiting for Angus Taylor to challenge Susan Lee.
MPs waiting on Angus Taylor to challenge Susan Lee for the leadership.
But of course, tumbleweeds did not happen. So again, the timing moves to the big move from Taylor tonight, the freedom to be able to hit the phones tonight and tomorrow, the resignations from shadow cabinet, and then potentially again that forcing, to say it for the 800th time. But I just want people to understand that that is part of a potential option here. And then you, of course, had the 6 p.m. newses. And if ever you wanted to know the difference between deep, granular conversations that you'll get on this channel and what many people will see, here's how it was covered tonight on both Channel 9 and Channel 7.
The Liberals dial emergency on Susan Lee's leadership, waiting for Angus Taylor's trigger finger.
A leadership spat tailor-made for mockery.
Dear God. Paul Scar is the Shadow Immigration Minister. He serves in the Shadow Ministry, but not the Shadow Cabinet, and he joins us now. Senator, thank you for the conversation. Why should Susan Lee remain as the leader of the Liberal Party and thus the opposition?
Good to be with you, Paul. Good to be with your viewers. I think we've got to remember it's only been 9 months since the last federal election campaign. And from my perspective, I believe Susan deserves a fair go. She deserves clear air. And especially after that terrible, horrific Bondi terrorist attack, I was really inspired. I was absolutely inspired by the way Susan rose to the occasion, acted in solidarity with our Jewish community in their worst moment, and was there with them through that whole process. And I think Susan's efforts in her regard, and my dear friend and colleague Julian Leese's efforts in that regard as well, assisted in terms of dragging the Albanese Labor government, kicking and screaming, to set up a Royal Commission. And I think that was a profound moment, and I think it was a real success. I also note that Susan has managed to navigate the very difficult issue of an affordable energy and reliable energy policy, and that's been put to bed. That is a major policy position, a major milestone for the coalition. And after that decision was reached, there's been no disagreement with respect to that policy decision, everyone has gotten behind that. So I continue to support Susan. Whatever happens, Paul, this week, whatever happens, I just dearly hope everyone comes out of it united and committed to providing a strong opposition to hold the Albanese Labor government to account.
All right, I didn't want to interrupt, but I will from now, which is, of course, the opinion polls. You're at a point now where it's 19%. One Nation, yes, is the one that has taken most, if not all, of that support. So the reality is that despite what you're talking about, the public do not believe what you have just said as a reason to rally around the party in general, let alone the leader.
Yeah, well, I acknowledge the opinion polls, and we've come through an extremely difficult time over the last few weeks. Obviously, the coalition split apart, and then there were weeks of discussions, 18, 19 days where we were just talking about ourselves, and the Australian people have gotten rightly frustrated by that, and we need to do a better job. There's absolutely no question about that, Paul.
So, OK, but what about, again, tactically, one of the things that was in there as well with Bondi was the demanding of Parliament to return and, of course, the split in the coalition that came as a result of how things were negotiated, final positions. That, of course, is a scenario that the Nationals have to take the responsibility for, but surely Susan Lee does as well, doesn't she?
Well, Paul, I think Parliament should have been recalled before Christmas. I was actually in the United States when 9/11 happened, and I can remember I was in Washington, D.C. when 9/11 happened, and I can remember members of Congress coming together on the stairs of Congress singing God Bless America, and what a unifying moment that was for the country. So I think Parliament should have been recalled before Christmas, and we should have passed whatever laws we could as quickly as possible. And in my portfolio space, and it hasn't been discussed much, there were important reforms made, amendments made to the Migration Act, which will boost the powers of the government to screen and vet people seeking to come to Australia and assist in the cancellation of visas of those who are here engaging in conduct contrary to our Australian values, including, say, walking down the street screaming globalise the intifada. So there were important reforms that were passed.
All right, last one here. Do you believe that somebody has changed their mind when it comes to that numbers that I was talking about before? Again, could be a little higher, could be a little lower. We'll all find out when and if that is required. And do you believe that this should be tested regardless of how we get there, that this should be tested within the next 24 hours, within the next 48 hours?
Paul, I think the expectation of the Australian people is that this needs to come to an end as quickly as possible and we need to move on.
Right, so your expectation...
That has to be a priority from my perspective.
Right, so your belief is that should happen without forcing a number of people to sign this, that and the other and all the rest of it, that your hope would be that there is an opportunity for the 51 people who are the Liberals in the federal parliament to make a choice and to have that vote, whenever it is seen fit before they all fly home on perhaps Friday.
Well, I'd simply make 2 points. I'd say, first, that Susan is an incredibly honourable person and she will do the honourable thing in all of the circumstances, in conjunction with our whips, who are good people, and they will undertake whatever the process is from here on. It will be fair and reasonable, and that's the way it should be. But I just say, as a member of the opposition, as someone who's been a member of the Liberal Party from when I was 17, so we're talking about 39 years, we need this to come to an end as quickly as possible, and we need to present a unified front. So whatever the result over the course of this week, we need to accept that result and focus on the job the Australian people elect us to do.
All right, Paul, appreciate the short notice. Thank you for turning up. I do appreciate it. Senator Paul Scar joining us there from Canberra. Again, in the next 40 minutes or so, if there's anyone from the Taylor camp, you know where the studio is, you know who my producer is, and if you've got my number, feel free. We'll organise it and give you the opportunity to state the case. Lots to discuss in all of this, including I want to have a chat in a moment or two about values. It's not just political values, it's Australian values. And I've got a little bit of evidence that I don't want to play into the conversation about who should be the Liberal Party leader, but for those of us who don't want the government that we currently have, about what are some of the potential entry points into convincing the required number of people in the required number of seats that there is a better option than the government that we currently have. But one of the reasons we are where we are tonight, in part, is because of relentless bad polling, and that polling is, again, covered in the Sky News Pulse tonight. The Sky News Pulse, which was released this morning at skynews.com.au, is a story where One Nation continues to hit new highs. As we showed you in that primary vote before, that the Liberal Party is down now to a coalition of just 19%. One Nation is now at the highest numbers it has been in a significant period of time, at now 28%. They are up 3% since we did this poll just 2 weeks ago. Also really important here too is that One Nation's numbers get higher when the people doing the poll were trying to work out where the working class of Australia is right now. 34%. The preferred party of the working class is One Nation. To Labor's 27, the Coalition's 14, 12 the Greens and 13 others. Now, as I told you last night, a reality of the system is preferences. Preference discipline matters. It matters if you're a One Nation voter, what you do. It matters if you're a coalition voter, what you do. It matters if you're another voter in terms of getting to a position of 76 seats to change the government. Well, of course, that would not happen at an election should one have been held in the past couple of days, because the Labor Party would be at 54, the Coalition at 56. That is a 1 point difference in favour of the Coalition, but still would have a handsome majority for the Labor Party. So what happens if One Nation leapfrogs the Coalition and they would become the main non-Labor party? Well, you get to 55-45. Now, the really interesting number to notice there is a 2% increase in just 2 weeks, which doesn't just mean a surge in support for One Nation, it does mean a potential change in some of those preferences. In terms of some of the issues that are worth talking about, housing in Australia really matters. I know people that have been hardcore voters their whole life, Labor or Liberal, who've said if somebody nailed the right housing policy, they would vote for them even if they disagreed with everything else. So it's interesting here that the majority, or at least the largest number of people suggesting which policy approach would be best from the government when it came to housing policy, 35% say do more supply, so build more houses. Rein in tax concessions, which is what the government is starting to talk about with things like capital gains tax. That's 27%. Build more public housing is 24%. That's interesting because, remember, as I told you before, there are very close to about 500,000 people around the country who are in need of public housing. There's public housing waiting lists of about 60,000 in New South Wales, a similar number in Queensland and in Victoria. So might be a little less than 500,000, but you get my point. And then the rest, including leave as, the option, I presume, that was voted by perhaps the property tycoon that is the Prime Minister. Now, to the Australian values of things, and as the political party of the Liberal Party and its representatives, hopefully sooner rather than later, most likely, you would imagine the opportunity is there tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon, or at latest on Friday morning. We know they're going to make a choice, not just about leader, but about what worldview, what tactic, what vision, what policy they wish to go. Now, again, we know where the party is under its current leadership and current way of doing things, and we know where that sits right now in the opinion polls. The belief of the Susan Lee camp is the longer she has in the job, the better chance she has to be able to change that situation. The reason why Angus Taylor has had to pull the pin as he has now is because of, in part, the polling, which is, of course, showing that huge runoff to One Nation at the moment. Now, this is not a conversation about going Goldilocks, where you go a little bit ghost, sorry to trigger you, or you go a little bit more traditional, liberal values, ones that, yes, have well and truly been successful in the past. I'm always interested, and I remember in the conversations that we had on air in the lead up to the 2019 election, the surprise one where nobody knew what was going on, that every now and then I try to keep an eye on not just political polling, but also some social polling, and also some information that goes around in the media, entertainment, marketing and advertising world. Because, of course, people want to sell things, and they want to sell things to the most number of people possible. So what I'm about to show you is not political polling. It is values polling that shows a difference between the values of 2022 and the values of 2025. Now, it is done by an agency, but it also is backed up by YouGov. These are the same people who do the Sky News Pulse, which is why I bring this to you tonight. In 2022, the top Australian values were honesty, freedom, equal opportunity, compassion, work ethic. Mateship was 6th. In 2025, the same survey was released. So this is not right now heartbeat stuff, but it is where we went. Now, as I say, in 2022, I apologise, I got the graphic wrong before, equal opportunity, freedom, mateship, honesty and security, as you can see, the ranks there. 2025, what has replaced this? Security. And I don't just mean in a national security way. I'll explain what security means according to these surveys. Honesty, equal opportunity, compassion and sustainability. Now, again, before you automatically go, well, kind of super lefty stuff, again, I'm not talking about left and right. I'm just talking about how the people who sell stuff to Australians, the feedback and information that they get using the same methodology and the same people that are behind our Sky News Pulse, which is just me trying to put something into the conversation. You notice what's nowhere near that list? Mateship, of course. What are people scared about? They're scared about the increasing global conflict, so that's everything from the Middle East, the environment, rising inequality. Now, of course, you can play this out from the political lens of the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, or you could view it potentially through, I was able to buy a house, but my kid can't buy a house. And misinformation. Remember, while lots of people turn to the internet, they don't trust it. So here's a couple of opportunities for anyone in the political space about your ideas, your values, your policies, and the way for people to perhaps listen to you if they haven't listened to you in a while. 34% of people feel optimistic about the future. That is the minority of Australians, according to this survey. That pessimism comes from many different places. Again, is it about global conflicts? Is it about rising inequality? But that in and of itself doesn't just show right track, wrong track. That shows something about the emotional state of people. Also, 43% of people don't feel a sense of community or belonging. So again, if you're One Nation, if you're the Libs, if you're the Greens, if you're Labor, if you're the Libertarians, perhaps there are insights, and again, from little things, big things grow, but I offer all of this as a thought starter, not as a push or a pull about which way MPs will go in the next little while. Because Australian values, they change. Inherent awesomeness of Australia, never up for grabs. But the good thing about the modern day is that we are able to get insight. Now, you shouldn't just bend yourself to match polling, but sometimes these perhaps are the opportunities to say, well, okay, our national security policy, how does that help us deal with the global threats? How does our housing policy help deal with that sense of inequality? What do you define it to be? Now, again, the art of politics, and as we saw with The Voice, you can see 60-40 one way becomes 60-40 another way once people take a position and that position is argued logically and passionately in a coherent fashion. And people in Australia are always open to what they consider to be the better option. Just a thought starter.